My name is Rachel Harris, and for my final project, I wanted to explore how different expectations led Kissing Jessica Stein to get such mixed reviews. The class concept that I will be exploring is lesbian representation in the media, particularly historical representation versus modern representations. Originally, I wanted to do a comparison between the success of Kissing Jessica Stein and Blue is the Warmest Color, but that was too broad of a topic and probably too lengthy for this project anyway. So upon review of our past material, instead I chose to do a more thorough analysis of why Kissing Jessica Stein had such mixed success. The reviews I read weren't exhaustive, but between the good and the bad reviews that I did read, and considering my own opinion, I think the key as to why people had such mixed reviews is because we had different expectations as to what the movie should be. In particular, it was the different expectations of what the film was supposed to be about, which ultimately displayed a difference in expectations of what lesbianism is and how it should be represented, as well as a difference in expectation of what the film was supposed to be in relation to the advancement of the LGBTQ community that caused this movie to be taken in so many different ways. So first, let's ask, what is this movie really about? It seems as if there are a couple different stances as to what the movie may or may not be about. For example, someone who wrote a good review expected it to be about friendship. This person's view is interesting because it actually seems the least expected. But they really do seem to think that this movie was just supposed to explore the ups and downs of female friendship. They even seem to quote the writers of the movie when they say that it was only meant to explore the unique bond and intimacy that exists between women in friendship. That leads most of us to ask at one point or another, how is this relationship different from the one that I have with my lover or boyfriend or spouse? After comparing it to another movie in which they think a female friendship is deeply explored, they continue their point about this movie, describing some of the things that the couple do together and pointing out that this is just how normal friends act. In the end, this reviewer is really happy with the film because, in their opinion, it does explore the ups and downs of female friendship and was never meant to say anything about sexual orientation or what it may lead to. Personally, I think their conclusion is kind of troubling because they do at some point acknowledge that Jessica and Helen both consider themselves to be lesbian, but then the reviewer sort of dismisses that by saying that no, this is really just any other female friendship. And that sort of statement also seems sort of strange, because according to the CDC, between 2006 and 2008, only 12% of women reported participating in same-sex sexual behavior, which is likely a larger percent than in 2001 when the movie was actually made. But however, I think we can all agree that the majority of women do have at least one close relationship with another woman, meaning that Jessica and Helen's relationship couldn't possibly represent the average female friendship. However, contrary to the optimists, other reviewers who disliked the movie or thought it was only okay at best expected it to be about lesbians. But then the question becomes, what is the lesbian that we are expecting to look at, and what is it we think we got? Here I think it's useful to look at a bit of history. In an excerpt from her book, Judith Halberstam notes that historically lesbianism has been seen as some model of asexual romantic friendship or mixed-gendered identification. And by the latter I mean that if someone saw what they thought was a lesbian relationship, they assumed that one woman was really a woman, while the other felt like a man. It's important to note that Halberstam didn't really agree with these versions of lesbianism or its umbrella usage for all same-sex desire between women. However, it's not really relevant since I'm really only interested in how the term was traditionally defined by the majority. Robert Gillette and other critics also note that there is disagreement on whether or not sexual activity is even necessary to a lesbian relationship, even though, according to Vito Russo, homosexuality has traditionally been tied to sex. Given that, I think it's interesting to see how critics' views of how lesbianism is represented in the movie parallels to the ideas from the past. The Optimist seems to agree with the model of friendship, but contrary to Halberstam's claim, rejects that it represents a lesbian relationship. He actually seems to parallel an even older stance that women are expected to have close relationships, but that it can't possibly be any more than that because women aren't sexual. I'm sure the Optimist wasn't really trying to say that, and I think back in those days, the evidence of Jessica and Helen's sexual relationship would have proved them to be lesbians, but I think the relation between their thought process can still be made. Another more pessimistic reporter seems to have wanted to see a version of lesbianism which, like portrayals of heterosexual couples, emphasize love and romance rather than sex. So this reporter disagrees with Barbara Ellen's notion that sex defines a lesbian relationship, which helps explain why she thinks the movie is a misrepresentation, since in the end it seems like what really breaks up the relationship is the lack of sex. But when I saw this reporter's opinion, I saw it as more than just a complaint about the implied necessity of sex to a lesbian relationship. Instead, I thought this reporter's dissent could easily be from her view that the movie relies too much on the same misgendered identification idea of lesbianism, which Halberstam complained about. I came to this conclusion because in her review, she constantly says that she feels the movie portrays a masculine version of sex. In addition, she claims that because of this, and the fact that Jessica ends up with a man in the end, that the movie describes only one real lesbian, while the other is fake. And another pessimistic reporter makes similar claims. But this really isn't so different from the idea that one lesbian is the feminine and proper woman who is really into masculine qualities as opposed to feminine ones, while the other really identifies as a man and so is attracted to the former. I realize that only looking at these few reviews opens up for some misgivings, but given just these examples, I think we do in fact see that each review had their own idea of what they thought they should be seeing, and based on that, had a large effect on how each viewed the outcome of the movie. The other thing that largely influenced the reviews of the movie relates to my second point. What is this movie supposed to do for the LGBTQ community? By this I mean, does the movie have to be taken seriously, or can it just be comic relief? The crux of this problem is that although the movie does accurately portray some aspects of lesbian relationships and successfully questions some negative attitudes, people are still concerned that the movie will confirm other stereotypical and historically bad representations of lesbians that may be hard to dispel later. And it is hard to deny that there are some stereotypical portrayals, although some are more subtle than others. For example, some of the more obvious stereotypes are the previously explored assumptions that sex is the end-all be-all to homosexual relationships, and that in a lesbian relationship, one lesbian is real while the other is not. In addition to those, some may say the movie still A. assumes that women are reduced to the status of lesbian only after having failed to have successful heterosexual relationships, B. portrays homosexuality as second best when Jessica's mom gives a lengthy speech revealing that she knows about her daughter's relationship with Helen, and C. depicts homosexual relationships as being unable to end successfully. Sure, it is no longer deemed necessary to kill off one of the characters at the end, like homosexual movies were required to do during the time of the production code, but by breaking off the relationship in the end and letting Jessica revert to her relationship with Josh, it still seems to say that a successful homosexual relationship isn't allowed. Some of the more subtle implications may be a little harder to pick up on, and probably depend heavily on the viewer. Something that I thought I picked up on was the possible but traditional misrepresentation of lesbians as abnormal. Jessica seems to have severe anxiety issues and can easily be described as neurotic, while Helen has an extremely excessive libido and feels it acceptable to have sex while at work. Perhaps I'm wrong, but that doesn't really seem to be the description of two average girls. I understand that characters need to be interesting, but I think it was probably possible to do that and still have them be normal girls, whatever that means, doing something that was traditionally thought of as abnormal. Something that Gillette seems to pick up on is an expression of lesbianism as being unnatural, what with all the awkward scenes of what he calls kissing lessons, along with Jessica's nervous research about how to have sex with a girl. He also goes to a very extreme position and says that Helen's surprise first kiss for Jessica can even be seen as homophobic. To me, this implication seems kind of outlandish, but Gillette still seems to find it anyway. Aside from perpetuating stereotypes, Gillette, our extreme critic, also complains that the movie is essentially superficial and is contrary to what queer theory is trying to say. But this also seems sort of out of left field, because who expected this movie to portray all the complicated, albeit sophisticated, aspects of queer theory? Are we really expecting this movie to be perfect in every lesbian or queer aspect, considering it didn't actually have a lot of positive precedent in the media to go off of? It seems it would be more realistic to see this movie as a small start to properly exploring some of the complexities of gender and sexuality. Sure, it may make some blunders along the way, but I think this class, at least, has shown that this is a confusing topic, and it can't all be learned in one day, or even in a semester. In conclusion, obviously some reviewers had higher expectations of the movie, which caused them to criticize it for falling short. Some expected a perfect film that accurately portrayed friendship, real lesbians, or queer theory as a whole, and were upset when the film had advancements as well as pitfalls. I'd like to continue exploring the topic, specifically to note the differences between how academics view the movie versus how the general public viewed it, as well as the differences between how people receive Blue is the Warmest Color, a generally successful lesbian movie, versus how they viewed Kissing Jessica Stein. However, regardless of what we may continue to analyze, it's likely that the difference, like in this analysis, probably hinges on what people are expecting and how they respond to those expectations. Thank you.